But we'd like to get into our discussion now, and we are going to be talking about all manner of things with our guests here in studio. I'm so glad to be joined by Honorable Anyang Nyongo, Minister for Medical Services and also Secretary General of the Orange Democratic Movement. Thank you very much for coming in.
Morning, you.
Good morning. An early morning for you and a long day ahead.
Well, not really early, it's just that coming to Mombasa Road early in the morning,
Right.
to wake up rather early.
Yes, it is a busy time for you, both in the party and in the government. Let's talk about the Quad Alliance now, and being Secretary General and the driver of the Orange Democratic Movement Party. Tell us about the thought process behind getting into the alliance with the members that, that you chose.
Well, you know, we had been having discussions with the two parties who are now our partners, the Forward Kenya and the Wiper Democratic Movement, for quite some time. Seeing that in order to form a government, you really need a majority in Parliament. And also seeing that in order to form a government, you need to have some ideas or some policies, some visions, some concerns about what you want to do to the country. So it's not just a question of getting a majority, it's a question of agreeing on the vision, on the mission, on the policies, and on the concerns, really, with the country. Concerns in the sense that although we have passed a constitution, which we have struggled for a very long time, one major concern is it going to be implemented, how, what is it going to cost to implement the constitution? What are some of the hurdles and problems in the way? To what extent are you going to transform or reform state structures to make this possible? These are issues that you can't take for granted. And therefore, if you're forming a coalition, you really must sit down and discuss very thoroughly with your coalescing partners the extent to which you agree and the extent to which you don't agree. Coalitions are always like that. You remember in the early 70s, the French Communist Party and the French Socialist Party formed a coalition. The most prolific leader of this coalition was Monsieur Georges Marchais of the Communist Party, who of course in those days was really to the left of everybody. Now people couldn't imagine that the Communist Party and the Socialist Party could come together. But they decided that first with a goal list and the problems that faced France after the decolonization, they needed a coalition of the left to form government. And they came together in what they call the common program, or Programme Commun. I think these are lessons that people learn and say, look, if you want to achieve a certain objective at a time when the social transformation of the country is very important, you must somehow get some like-minded people. The word like-minded is overused here.
Yes.
But at least some people with whom you can sit down and discuss basic issues, agree on a common program, and agree to say, well, that's a common program we're going to pursue. We are not necessarily dissolving our identities, but at least there's a program we're pursuing for the next 5 years.
Okay, all right. And when you talk of like-minded individuals, of course the greatest question a lot of Kenyans have is how Orange Democratic Movement and the Wiper Democratic Movement were able to come together, considering what happened in the last general election. Divergent views, how are you able to find common ground between ODM and Wiper?
I would say not so much like-minded individuals, but like-minded social forces. Of course, the embodiment of these social forces are individuals. Well, the ODM Kenya, or what transformed itself into Wiper Democratic Movement, we were all together. You remember when we separated, they went away with an orange and a half.
Yes.
And we remained with one orange.
With one orange, that's right.
I think we decided that this orange and a half and the one orange have lived apart long enough, and now to come to some understanding. And I think there are many issues that we have in common. I think in essence, we all wanted a new constitution. I think the Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs, Mutula Kilonzo, who has been very prolific in defending the constitution, is an example of the fact that he was really doing what we in the ODM would have liked the Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs to do. In that regard, there was already a common thinking. And secondly, the Vice President himself is concerned for social issues, being the Minister for Home Affairs, and he has learned a lot about the social issues, the issues of the downtrodden, those who go to prisons, where they go. So it has been a learning process for a year, and I think that, not a year, for 4 or 5 years, and I think that this brings certain common issues that we can share regarding those basic concerns that comes out in the implementation of the Constitution. And of course, you see, we all agree, I think, in the coalition, that in order to go forward in pursuit of Vision 2030, we really need to build a national democratic and developmental state. It's only a national democratic and developmental state that will first guarantee national unity and cohesion, and secondly, expand democracy, continue expanding democracy, as indeed is required in the Constitution, and have a social democratic development agenda. And so the concept of a national democratic and developmental state is really at heart in the formation of the coalition.
Okay, all right. You mentioned in the beginning the Constitution being a very important subject, its implementation being equally important. Your opponents say that's not something you should really be harping on as the Cord Alliance, as the Orange Democratic Movement, because that's already going on in place. How important is the process of Constitution implementation for the Alliance, and why have you chosen this as one of the major...
I'm surprised somebody can say that that's not something that we should be concerned about. You should be concerned about it. Today in the paper you see the Committee for the Implementation of the Constitution already crying that somebody is trying to derail the devolution.
Yes.
Of course, there are various ways of looking at the issue of devolution. Somebody may definitely want to obstruct devolution, that's for sure, but you don't expect court to do it, okay? But then there's another angle to it, which is very interesting. I mean, devolution doesn't mean that there's a total divorce between county government, national government, definitely not. Secondly, devolution doesn't mean that national government stops doing what it should be doing because devolution is coming, no. The national government must continue doing things that is doing, and must do it conscious of the fact that there's devolution. But there's going to be a thin line of division between the national government and devolved government in certain areas. Those areas sometimes confuse people. Take, for example, delivery of medical services, the issue of the supply chain mechanism in delivering drugs. That's not something that ab initio you can hand over totally to devolved government, because first, they don't have the institutional capacity to do it. Two, it is full of a lot of problems. I mean, this country has taken years building the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency. And when I came in, the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency was in crisis. And I remember having to dissolve the board, do a lot of things, put together a committee, a task force that laid down the roadmap. Now, look, if that could happen in the national government, imagine a devolved government beginning with a tabula rasa in establishing a supply chain mechanism. So you must continue strengthening the national government capacity to do this. And when devolved government come into being, there will be a period of interaction, of a learning curve for devolved government as the national government devolves these functions, the county government. And I think that the Commission of the Implementation of the Constitution should be a little bit cautious in being rather technical and legalistic in interpreting devolution. So those two areas are very important. One, let us distinguish between the obstructionist approach to stopping devolution and the evolutionary approach to building devolution, noting that services must continue to be delivered and capacity built. This takes time and takes existing expertise which at the moment exists at the national level.
All right. Do you believe that there are some within the political class who either do not have the will to implement the Constitution or will actually go outright to prevent implementation of
I do
certain
believe
aspects?
so. I do believe so because, you see, my experience in government shows that during the authoritarian presidential state, the state was a cash cow for a lot of people. It was a route towards primitive accumulation. And people who have been used to this may find it rather difficult to give up power to structures which will be closer to the people, therefore, where, yes, there may be temptation to corruption, definitely, at a smaller scale, but of course, given the institutions and structures that have emerged, will be emerged in the Constitution, makes it a little bit difficult. Okay, so they don't really want these institutions to come up and establish themselves because they will make it a little bit more difficult to do what they've been doing. So that's a reality. That's a reality we have to live with. And it's a reality that we have to see how to wade through as we build devolved government and as we seek to build a national developmental democratic state in our nation.
Okay. Let's take a look at your opponents in the run-up to the general election. There's been, I think the international community has dubbed some of them fairly or unfairly, the coalition of the accused. What is your thoughts on the possibility of us having a president and a deputy president who've been indicted at The Hague?
Well, you know, I'm focusing at the moment in making sure that the Coalition for Reform and Democracy comes into power, because that's what I believe will make a difference to this nation. I put a little bit at the back of my mind the darker possibilities, which I think we will confront when we cross the bridge. But at the moment, I'm so preoccupied with the practical elements of building the Coalition for Reform and Democracy.
That is a very good answer, Moshiba.
That I rarely venture
That's a very
into that
safe
territory.
answer. That's a very safe answer.
Yeah.
Let's then put it this way.
Yeah.
The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has said that all persons who have cases in court will still be allowed to run unless and until those cases are heard and determined. Do you think this is a fair position? Do you think they should actually say anyone who has any court case of any kind should first step aside, deal with that court case issue before then seeking elective office?
Well, you know, dealing with the legacy of the previous judicial system, which Chief Justice William Mutunga is really trying very hard to reform, and you don't reform it overnight. There may be certain cases which really don't warrant it, you know, which are dubitable. And I think that the Anti-Corruption Commission will err on the side of caution rather than on the side of certainty. So I think if I were to err on the side of caution, I would say that I would uphold the decision of the Anti-Corruption Commission, because the practices of the judicial system that William Mutunga is now trying to reform did not really dispense justice as justice. So there may be cases that individuals which are accused which really are unfair. So at this point in time of transition, if we take a very hard line and say, provided your case in court, you cannot run, it may really be very unfair to quite a number of people, because there are certain people who have been taken to court on very shaky grounds. But because somebody wants to settle scores with them, they go ahead and push certain judges. Some of these judges are still being vetted. So I think let us give the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
To the Anti-Corruption Commission.
All right. Okay. Speaking of the courts, the Supreme Court released their ruling on the gender rule and the implementation process of that, saying it cannot be done by March 4th, 2013, and will be done progressively up until the year 2015. What is ODM's position on that?
We are studying that ruling at the moment. I must say that the party organs have not really met to discuss that ruling. And this, of course, means that not the other party organs, but we must synchronize our views with our coalition partners. And as Secretary General of the ODM and one of the architects of the Coalition for Reform and Democracy. I'd rather wait the process of discourse within the party and within the coalition to complete before we issue a comprehensive statement on this ruling.
Okay. Honorable Mutula Kilonzo had expressed his displeasure with that ruling, obviously because he's the immediate former Justice Minister, and this is something that he had hoped to see. What's ODM's structure in terms of, empowering women to make it to the top and to make it into elective positions? It's been said that it's a little unfair for women, it's a tough world for women in terms of many issues, including financing. Does ODM have a policy particularly for being a little more inclusive for women?
We do. You saw when we were electing members of parliament to the East African Legislative Assembly, we are the party who sent more women to the assembly than men, because it is important to put your money where your mouth is. And of course, we also, in our governing organs, we strictly obey the one-third rule. And we also created the Orange Women Democrats, which is a very important institution in the party, where the Orange Women Democrats really are empowered to articulate and organize women within the party, and also assert themselves in policy making in the party and the direction of the party. But further than that, more than that, in the coming elections, we have tried very hard to even headhunt for women candidates, encourage them and support them. And I assure you that when it comes to campaigning, we are going to be paying very particular attention to our women candidates, our youth candidates, and the candidates who come from marginalized areas. The party leader is very particular about this, and we are already taking certain affirmative action measures to make sure that they get onto the ballot. Now, quite often it's difficult, especially when you don't get enough volunteers to stand. You don't want to compel somebody to enter politics, even if it's not her mission.
That's right.
And also, it will also take time for certain bad practices that we have in our politics, to be aware. If it was my way, really, I would make voting compulsory. I would say once you are over 18, you must vote. If you don't vote, there are certain consequences of it, because it is your civic responsibility to vote. This idea that you have to register voters, whatnot, that in the end you end in certain areas, aspirants going to cajole voters to go and register is nonsense, I think.
Okay, and talking about voter apathy, of course, and you've made an interesting point there. People saying it's the political rhetoric that we see, around, it's the politicians, and they're saying this and they're saying that, and the 2007 clashes playing a role in that. Why is it so important for us to vote, and what would be your message to voters watching, potential voters who haven't gotten themselves registered, to whom I think the IEBC is trying to appeal to go out and get themselves registered? Why do you say it is compulsory, or should be, for everybody to vote?
You know, Yvonne, as a social scientist, there are certain things we call spurious correlations. You can try to explain a phenomenon by correlating two phenomena which are spurious, which really don't correlate. They seem to correlate, they seem to explain, but they don't quite explain.
Okay.
But at the face of it, they seem to explain. You really have to do a lot of research, a lot of fact-finding, as it were, to establish what causes what, or what leads to what. That's why Karl Marx once said that if appearances coincided with reality, science would be superfluous. It appears to me at this point in time that people are trying to correlate the apathy of voters to 2007 president. Look, since 2007 we have had a referendum. Ask yourself the question, what was the character of participation of the people in the referendum in 2010? And to what extent were the results of the 2010 election related to the 2007 violence? I mean, then it becomes correlation between the apathy and the two, it becomes rather spurious. That's one point. The other point is that, look, this year has been very intense, ever since last year, as we have come towards the voting. And there was a lot of controversy about the BVR. To me, I think that is more of a cause of the apathy than anything else. Because if you go down the rural areas, the kind of myth people have about the BVR,
about criminalizing them, taking your photo
your
and
there,
you'll
be sterile, or you will be impotent, That another thing, that if you put your hand there in certain places, that so much data will be taken from you. If you commit a crime, you can be found easily.
Yes.
Or if you have evaded taxes, you know. So there are a lot of myths going around about the BVR that I think people have said, why don't they just use the old thing that we knew? But the other thing is the mistakes of the IEBC itself. I'll give you an example. I'm a minister in the government. I go home to vote a weekend. I mean, we are very busy, so I wake up very early I go to the usual place that I should be voting at a primary school, and I find those people are not there. So I ask people in the market, but these characters are supposed to be here early in the morning by 8. Say, no, Mr. Minister, they are today in Nyamor. And Nyamor, you have to go around there, and I had to go to a rally somewhere. I didn't have the time to go around to Nyamor to go and find out where these fellows are. I was not even sure whether they were there. The other thing that they have done, which is wrong, is that even in Rata Primary School, Kivwitu and his team were very good. In fact, since I've been voting, I've always known that the people register you sit under a certain tree. That tree has been synonymous with voting.
Right.
These characters have now moved and hidden in a classroom somewhere.
Right.
So although there's this big sign at the entrance of the school that voting is taking place there, people look over the gate of the school and say, are they there? If they're not there, then they must have moved to Nyamor.
Exactly, that's right.
So I think some of these habits of voting, this particular IEBC, I think they have not been very conscious of what we call the habits of voting in the rural areas. And the third thing, which I think is very dangerous, is that after making so much hullabaloo about the BVRs, then you send very few BVRs to rural areas.
That's right.
So that somebody has to cover a distance of 50 kilometers to go to the next polling station. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me, really. So I think a lot of what you're seeing is a function of the noise that surrounded the coming voting, and then the mechanisms that the IBC has employed in doing these things. Now, of course, there are certain places, northeastern, where they say that at this point in time, camels are calving, and the men and the young boys are away tending the camel. You know, the camel is a different animal from the cow. When it calves, the calf must learn where the teat is, and this is a process that takes some time, and the herders must teach them how to do this about 10 days. So they give priority to this rather than go and register to vote. Absolutely. Further, if the voting station is so far from where they are calving camels, then they will not go. So I think let us be very realistic and not sentimental about this.
Is there any engagement between the Code Alliance and the Pambazuka Alliance?
Well, you know, putting Code Alliance itself is a big job. And I think we must do one thing at a time now. Time is also not on our side. So if we bite more than we can chew, we will not make it in time. So I think we are concentrating at the moment in getting the I's dotted and the T's crossed in the process of bringing the code together.
Okay, let's now go into questions that are being sent in by viewers. This is from Nixon Buru Ndugire in Kindaruma. He says, Honorable Anyang, Nyongo, we've seen coalitions and MOUs being dishonored. What assurance is there that code will stand the test of time?
Well, you know, once bitten, twice shy. We went through the MOU process. For us to do things that like they were done before would be tragic. And therefore, we really must rise above that. Human beings are not like spiders, you know. A spider weaves a very complicated web. No human being can weave a web like a spider does. But a spider does it the same way ever since Christ was here. It's never changed. Human beings change. They learn, they do things better. And so I think it is important to know that we went through that. We have to do better. Otherwise we become like spiders. We'll be maybe doing something good, but it's the same all over.
Right. Just going round and round in the web, yes.
So I think we have to do better. I think we learned. We are moving on. I think if you look at how the Code Agreement was designed, it was designed in such a way that it's very difficult to betray it, because the partners are kind of interlocked. In fact, our symbol now is an interlocked chain.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so definitely learning from the lessons of the past. What people maybe may not understand is the difference in the nature of that MOU, infamous MOU that did not work in 2002 with these pre-election pacts. Perhaps you can just explain. There's a legal element.
The big difference is that at that point in time, the MOU was not backed by any law. These pre-election pacts are backed by the law because they're in the Political Parties Act. You see, the Constitution also requires that they be done in a certain way. So they have been deposited with the register of political parties. So as it were, there is now a referee for making sure that these agreements are lived up to. At that point in time, it was a purely gentleman's agreement. And you know, a gentleman's agreement is very, very easy to break, especially if you're a fake gentleman.
Absolutely.
Or one of the parties is a fake gentleman. So.
Yeah.
So this one is not a gentleman's agreement. This is a real instrument of coalition with a referee.
Okay, all right. There's a question here. I think everybody wants to know what happened with Charity Ngilu's exit from the court. You know, at the rally at KICC, she seemed like she was on board and then quickly bolted back to the Jubilee Alliance. In your view, obviously, I'm sure you cannot speak on her behalf, but what do you think happened there?
Well, it is as difficult to understand as the peace of God. You know, in our prayers we say that the peace of God that passeth all understanding.
Yes.
It's as difficult as the peace of God that passeth all understanding. That's what I would say.
No inkling as to where things
I
broke
don't
down?
know. I have no clue at all. I am a spectator in the whole phenomenon, waiting to see where the denouement is. I wouldn't know where the denouement is. Yeah, it's like when you go to a play, it's good if there's an element of surprise, of suspense. And I think here we are seeing a lot of suspense.
Were you disappointed as ODM when she left to go to Jubilee Coalition?
It was so fast that we didn't even have time to be disappointed. I mean, it's like lightning, you know. If it hits you, you're unlucky. But if it doesn't hit you, you forget.
Giving us very safe answers here on Sunrise Live, Honorable Anyang, Nyongo. Let's move on to other areas, you know, away from politics now. And I think it would be rather unfair of me to have you here and not talk about the ongoing nurses' strike. We're having many questions about that from Kim and several other viewers. Thank you for your SMSs. Hi, Professor. Nurses are on strike. Patients are suffering in public hospitals. What's your take with what's happening? Obviously, the health industry has gone through quite a bit of
nurses are on strike for a reason I can't really deal with. The registration of their union, you know, that is in the territory of my colleague, the Minister for Labour, you see, and it would be wrong for me to cross territory and try and deal with issues of unions. I called them when they announced that they were going to strike to my office to discuss, and only the Progressive Nurses Association came, and we had a 2-hour meeting going through all those points. They agreed that the other issues that were being raised were being dealt with by government, and they had been meeting regularly with our officers. Then the only issue that was left was the union, and I told them, look, the way I see it, and this is just my impression, is that there are certain steps that you can take legally in registering a union, and that have been taken by some other people. One, if the register of the unions refuse to register your union, you can appeal to the minister. If the minister then turns down your appeal, you can go to court. Now, they are striking after the first step. Now, the register of unions refused to do so because there were objections from other unions, like the Civil Servants Union raised objections. Now, when such objections come, you must have a referee that looks at these things and say, look, are these objections valid or not? If the register of the unions or trade unions or society or whatever refuses to do that, then you take it to the minister. If the minister then fails, then you take it to court. This is what is called good governance or the rule of law. Now, these nurses, after the first step, say, no, we are not going to follow the principle of good governance or obey the rule of law. We are going to go on strike against a ministry which is not involved. You see, you are punishing the innocent. I wish they could go and strike and paralyze the Ministry of Labour rather than the Ministry of Medical Services. So when I tried to reach the leaders of the other Panyako, well, first he refused to take my call. Secondly, I sent him a message. He didn't respond. Finally, I guess a response and said, we are fighting for our rights till the end. The only person who can solve our problems is Honorable John Muñez. That is true. But then why don't you go and meet Honorable John Muñez and discuss? Why do you have to punish innocent patients in Ahero or in Mombasa or in Isiolo by going on strike? I don't understand it, because you see, this issue of taking strikes that easily and punishing innocent people, that is not fair. I mean, there is room for discussion. There are laws to be followed. I mean, why individuals just choose to do drastic things like this defeats my mind.
It has been a tumultuous year for the health industry. There's been the NHIS saga, there's the doctor strike, and there's the nurses strike. How would you sum it up for your ministry, taking a look back at the year 2012?
Well, when I look at it, we have done a lot, actually, and we are going to do a book on putting to the public what we've done. The NHIS, of course, we are bringing changes, and when you bring changes, you know, there is resistance. And now we are moving very well. You know, the report by the Efficiency Monitoring Unit is very good. In fact, it commends what NHIS was doing, doesn't find anything wrong with the former chief executive, says, yes, there was a board crisis, but it didn't warrant putting their caretaker committee. He said that caretaker committee did more harm than good to the fund. So the facts are there in the MOU report. In the Efficiency Monitoring Unit report, EMU. And this is what I said at the beginning, that look, please, we know what we are doing. Don't do these things you're doing now. You're going to just mess up the fund, you see. Secondly, we have made tremendous strides. First of all, in 4 years, we have transformed the KEMSA tremendously. The distribution of drugs is much more efficient and accountable. We have made several strides in bringing together proposals for universal health care. We have been signing MOUs with universities, putting before them hospitals to be used as teaching and research facilities. I was at Moi, MTRH, Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital just the other day, laying foundation stones for 3 institutions coming up, a cancer and complicated diseases center, and so on. So these will be known by the public. So what you see in the press as problems in the ministry is what the press usually do. I mean, bad news sells. Good news doesn't really sell, you see. So that is understandable.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
As we come to the close of our discussion, your plans for 2030? We do know you're running for the Kisumu County Senate.
Yes, I'm running for the Kisumu County senatorial seat, which I think I will get. I think there's very good support for me in Kisumu County, given what I've done, not just in Kisumu, but the nation as a whole. As a parliamentarian of many years standing as a minister for national development and planning, having been responsible for the economic recovery strategy for wealth and employment creation, the creation of the National Economic and Social Council, and the planting of the seeds that gave birth to Vision 2030. So I think going to the Senate is a logical development to where I'm in politics at the moment. But at the same time, going to the Senate doesn't mean that we leave national and international concerns, which have always been my love for many years. I'll continue with that. And I look at the next coming years to playing a very important role in creating what I call a national developmental democratic society in this nation.
Okay. The rally that's coming up on December the 22nd, the Chord Alliance, what do we expect to hear from that? You said earlier on that in plays there are surprises. Any surprises for us, December 22nd?
If I tell you what a surprise, there will not be surprises, Yvonne.
Okay, so nothing more to add on that?
Nothing more to add. Just look forward to that day. It's going to be a wonderful day, just like our convention was, all the 2 conventions of the Alliance. The convention, the delegates convention of the ODM and the Wiper Democratic Movement were both quite exciting. And I think that what we're going to see now, when the 2 are combined, look for something surprising.
Indeed. We'll leave it at that for now. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on Sunrise Live, Honorable Anyang Nyongo, Secretary General of the Orange Democratic Movement and Minister for Medical Services, saying December the 22nd, when they have their big rally at Uhuru Park, it's a surprise that you do not want to miss. All right. Thank you. And we've been fielding all your questions to him. We hope he's been able to address some of those issues as well.